collaboration with the Cyprus Mayor, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, Cypriot MEPs outline their hopes for 2016.
To be more active in the Near East, to push the peace process. And the second one is to find a way to change the austerity policy, to have a policy for more growth.
And accuse their peers of hypocrisy.
There is a lot of hypocrisy within the European Parliament, and nobody is doing what verbally they are exposing the others instead of being committed and devoted to principles and values of the European Union.
The Netherlands comes up with a novel idea for its EU presidency.
And we have decided now to transport all delegations by boat. So people walk from their hotel to a boat in the morning. We'll have a very nice and smooth 20-minute ride by boat to the location, and then in the evening back, and then the canals are very beautifully lit with artwork.
And it just got easier for some professionals to work in other EU countries.
General care nurses, physiotherapists, pharmacists, real estate agents and mountain guides. These are the first professions that will benefit from this new card, this new set of measures.
A new year is always a time for reflecting on the past and planning for the future. And last week I had the chance to chat to two of Cyprus MEPs about their achievements and aspirations. Neoklis Silikiotis was pretty upbeat about 2015.
I think that 2015 it was a bad year also for the peace in the world. We see what is happening in our neighborhood with the war in Syria, the terrorist act from ISIS, and also it was one bad year also for the growth in Europe. We have the big problem in the finance and the economical area in many member states. I think and I hope that the next year we can be better. To be better, it was also our struggle in the European Parliament, and I believe also the big majority of my colleagues there to push in the direction that European Union can be more as a pillar for peace, to be more active in the Near East, to push the peace process. And the second one is to find a way to change the austerity policy, to have a policy for more growth. And I believe it's the only way to come again the economic growth and the prosperity for the people in Europe. And in that question, we must be more solidarity with the refugees. We see what is happening with the big discussion about the refugees. European area, it was since many decades of years one area to give more protection, asylum to the people. They escape from wars, they escape from the dictatorship, and I think it's one of the main principles to be solidarity to these people and to have one burden sharing between us. It is bad that to have this big pressure only the countries in the first front like Greece, Italy, Cyprus and Malta.
And yet Germany has done its part, and so indeed has Sweden and several other countries. But there does seem that while the Parliament in Europe may be thinking that this is the way to go, individual governments are actually trying to protect their own interests, and many of them seem to believe that welcoming refugees is not in their interest, and yet it would bring us the growth you're talking about.
Yeah, the problem is that Either we have the common acquis communautaire and common principles, and we must share the problem, and that is also the refugee problem. And from the other side, we see some governments, some member states, they want only to have the solidarity in one way. To give solidarity is very important, to give solidarity and to have solidarity from the other member states.
But what
and
can,
this
the,
is
what can the MEPs of those countries do? Because the other thing is, of course, that as members of the European Parliament, you're in a sense almost cut off from the politics in your local country, aren't you? Because you're dealing with other issues.
Yeah, the most important issue is to have the position. You remember during the last November the proposals by European Commission about the proposals for the sharing of the refugees. We put that decision very urgently, and that we have all except the xenophobic groups. All the other groups we vote in favor. Okay. As a GUE NGL, as the left group, we are not satisfied with the policy, the migration refugees policy of the EU, but in that position we put our votes in favor, because sometimes the crisis, the people, they need help, you must do immediately and not delayed.
Okay, can I ask you finally, what are your hopes for 2016? It's a new year. Is there hope for 2016?
The hope is to have for Cyprus is to open the door finally to have a reunification, and for Europe is to play a more important role for peace in the region, and to take a measure to have again a growth in Europe, and to solve the problems. We have a big problem, the unemployment by the youth, and we must go in this direction. And I say very honest, it's not only what I hope, I want to struggle in this direction, and I do that also in the European Parliament.
Cypriot MEP Neoklis Silikiotis. Another of our MEPs has been much in the news here recently. Dr. Eleni Theocharos left the ruling DC party in November, citing a divergence of views on the way the issue of the Cyprus problem was being handled. With Cypriot parliamentary elections coming up, last week she launched her Solidarity platform, vowing to, as she put it, tackle the assault launched by Turkey to dissolve the state, and to work for the liberation of Cyprus. This was her take on events in 2015.
It was a very productive year, although I insist that there is a lot of hypocrisy within the European Parliament, and nobody is doing what verbally they are exposing the others instead of being committed and devoted to principles and values of the European Union. I worked a lot with the Cyprus issue, especially in the Committee of the Foreign Affairs. I worked a lot with the Development Committee, which is involved in the developmental aid to the sub-Saharan African countries, the African Horn, the Caribbean, the Latin American, and the South Pacific poor countries. I participated in many missions in these countries, which means that I was traveling a lot.
And do you feel that what the European Union is doing for these countries is making a difference there?
No, because they are doing it the wrong way. I explained to them many times that it's the Danite pot. If you remember the Greek mythology, the cares of the daughters of Danaos, the 50 cares, who were cares to fill a pot which had 1,000 holes on it. You understand that this was not possible. The only thing to do is to start filling the gap and start closing the openings from the bottom of the pot.
So what would you suggest the European Union does?
We have to deal directly with the communities and not with corrupted regimes, corrupted governments. We have to bypass the red tape of all these countries. We must do it directly with volunteers on the spot. I know very well how it works because I spend my life, as you know, working with humanitarian aid and medical assistance to these countries. And eventually, I believe that I have convinced them.
So we may see a change in approach then for 2016. What else are you hoping for this year?
A solution to the Cyprus issue, a good solution, a fair solution, a solution which will restore and implement the human rights of the people of Cyprus all over the country with no derogation, with no discrimination, giving the people to choose where they want to live. I understand that in certain places there will be Turkish Cypriot regime authority, under the authority of the Turkish Cypriots, and in other places the same with the Greeks. But the people must have the right to choose where they want to live and not deprived their human rights, and their key will be implemented all over the island. This is my wish.
Cypriot MEP, Dr. Eleni Theocharos.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
The Netherlands took over the rotating EU Presidency last week, and I asked the Dutch ambassador to Nicosia, Breche Swarhova, to outline its priorities.
The Netherlands has 4 priorities during the presidency of the European Council in the next 6 months. Looking at the European agenda, we see migration and international security as priority number 1, where we're faced with huge challenges, where we'll try to further the decisions that we've taken in December. We are seeing as second priority Europe as an innovator and job creator. We think that in this area there is still a lot of work to be done, and if we make the single market deeper and fairer, the European economy as a whole could grow by 1.5 trillion euros. The third priority is a sound and future-proof European finances and robust Eurozone, something that we have been working on as an EU for a long time. Luckily, the deep crisis now is being followed by some recovery, but a lot of work still needs to be done in this area as well. And lastly, a forward-looking climate and energy policy, where we're looking at the Paris Climate Conference and the European Energy Union.
It's always difficult when you take over the presidency. You're working part of a trio, so the total for 3 presidencies has been agreed. When you're taking over from your predecessor and, of course, looking to hand on to the person coming after you, how do you pull all of that together and assess how successful you are in achieving what you've set out to do?
I think what is good to keep in mind is that as a presidency, what you mostly do is taking on the issues and proposals that were already on the table. You bring them forward. So it's not, you're not inventing new things, but you are following in the footsteps of your successor, and you then hand it over to your successor. And one of the ways of ensuring that is very close cooperation, which we have with Luxembourg, who were very good in handing everything over to us, and we will do the same thing with our Slovak colleagues.
It was fascinating when you told us about how the actual physical organisation is going to be. You said that you'd taken a tip from the Cyprus presidency in 2012 for holding all the meetings in one venue. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's an innovative venue. It's a sort of put up especially for the presidency building, which I want to hear more about, and also the transport. You've talked a little bit about sustainable transport and so on, and you're going to be in Amsterdam and ferrying all the delegates up and down to the venue by boat, which is rather fun, I would imagine, and from a security point of view, presumably very much safer.
That's right. We will have almost all our meetings in Amsterdam in one single location, which comprises 2 buildings, an existing maritime museum and a purpose-built, degradable building which will be taken apart after the presidency and reused later on for other purposes. And the concept of one building we've taken from the Cypriot Presidency, who were the first actually to have all the meetings in one location, and we thought that was a brilliant idea.
It's certainly a cheaper idea, isn't it? Because it's not a cheap thing to do to host the EU Presidency for 6 months.
It is a costly affair. It is much cheaper. That is absolutely correct. It's logistically much easier, and it's also safer because you only do one thing at the time, and you can work better towards ensuring the safety of the people. When it comes to transport, as you just brought up, the city of Amsterdam is very densely populated. In previous presidency, this is our 12th presidency, we've had citizens complaining about blockages of the road. So we thought we have to do this different next time, and we have decided now to transport all delegations by boat. So people walk from their hotel to a boat in the morning. We'll have a very nice and smooth 20-minute ride by boat to the location, and then in the evening back, and then the canals are very beautifully lit with artwork. And I've done it myself once in November, and it's very relaxing, and it's a very nice way to both start and end your day.
And it doesn't put everybody else to inconvenience blocking up the roads, of course.
Exactly.
A brief word, if you will, about what you'll be doing here in Cyprus. I know you are a small mission, so we don't expect huge numbers of events, but always the President of the European Union does hold events in all the European countries. What have you got lined up for Cyprus?
That's right. As you say, we are small, but we, of course, are going to organize a series of events in the country. We're starting this week with a concert of the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra, which will be followed by a human rights event later this month. We will have events around sustainable transport, both in May. One is a seminar on sustainable transport, and the second one, which is going to be open for everybody, is a big biking event that we're organizing around Europe, where we will on one day have one biking event in all 28 member states. And maybe I can use this occasion to invite everybody to participate in that event.
And biking is something that has begun to take off in Cyprus. I'm sure you might have been a bit shocked, because the Dutch seem to cycle everywhere, that it's relatively new in Cyprus. Are you hoping that this will, in a sense, promote the idea of two-wheel transport?
That is the aim of it. We have been working as embassy over the last 4 years on biking. We've been in contact with municipalities and the Department of Transport. We're transferring our knowledge because we believe that biking is the best way to transport yourself from A to B. If it is for a limited distance, it's good for your health, it's good for the environment, and it's good for your wallet. So it's a very good way to transport, and we would hope to see Cypriots get more on their bikes, yes.
The ambassador of the Netherlands to Nicosia, Breche Swarchova, talking there about the plans for the Dutch EU presidency and some of the events that will be taking place here in Cyprus.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
It just got easier for professionals in the European Union to move to other EU countries to work. You may, of course, know that different countries have different qualifications when it comes to things like medical staff, lawyers, of course, and many other professions. But the new European Professional Card aims to change that for at least some categories of professions, and it's come into force. To tell us what it used to be like and where this will take us is the spokesman of the European Commission representation in Cyprus, Babis Metaxas. Babis, this is something a lot of people, I think, have been waiting for, because certain categories particularly have not had the same freedom, in a sense, to move between European countries for work as others. So, first of all, who does it apply to?
Initially, this will apply to 5 professions, specifically general care nurses, physiotherapists, pharmacists, real estate agents, and mountain guides. These are the first professions that will benefit from this new card, this new set of measures, and they will be able, on the strength of this card, to either go and work in their chosen profession temporarily or take the first step towards permanent establishment in another EU member state.
How does it change from what was before? Because if we look particularly at things like nursing staff, in the medical profession, obviously, when we get as high as doctors, then there are very specific qualifications, and presumably they vary slightly from EU country to country. But people are always worried that maybe the training that's been undergone by somebody in one country is not quite up to scratch compared with their own, for example.
I think what we have to understand is that the introduction of the EPC, the European Professional Card, is more a procedural measure. It aims to speed things up rather than change the rules and the regulations. The qualifications that you will need to work, even in those professions, in another EU member state, will not change. What will change is that you will be able to submit your qualifications early on. These will be approved early on, much earlier, and then they will be maintained in a sort of an electronic locker, I suppose, a safe, where you will be able to access them at any point you need them, and so will prospective employers. This is what will become easier, especially if you want to move abroad, to move to another country on a temporary basis. If you want to settle somewhere, if you want to establish yourself permanently in another EU member state and exercise your profession, you may, in all likelihood, you will have to also register with professional bodies in that country and undergo some further checks. But with the EPC, you can take this first step much faster than you could before.
So it's not actually changing the qualifications needed in any given EU country, but this is just the first step. I was looking on the European website, and they were saying that other professions are expected to join the list before very long. Do we have any idea which those ones are?
No, we don't. I think we should treat the introduction of the EPC for these 5 professions as a pilot project in a way. See how that goes, see if it works, see how many people want to take advantage of it, and then we'll take it from there. What is important to say, because we use the term card, but people should not think that it is
a piece of plastic.
It's not a piece of plastic, exactly. It's a set of documents, your documents, plus the approvals that you submit. They are examined, they are approved, and then they stay electronically all the way in a vault, an electronic vault, an electronic safe, where they can be accessed. I mean, the advantage is, like I said, it is speed, it is consistency. You can use the same things to apply to work in 2 different countries. Before, you would have to collect a set of documents, submit it to one set of authorities, then do the same thing again and submit it to another set of authorities. That is eliminated.
Now you just tell them, go to this place and have a look at what I've got. Okay, but if we're looking at things like language barriers, now that, particularly when it comes to things like nursing, is obviously fairly important. Where does that feature? Has that been taken into consideration?
No, I think I don't expect to see any change there. I mean, the same requirements that were there in place before the introduction of this will continue to be.
So basically, if I'm a nurse and I decide I want to go and work in Portugal, I can show my qualifications electronically to my potential employers, and then they can invite me to submit, for example, how good I am at speaking Portuguese or Spanish or French or wherever else, and then say it's not up to standard, so I'm sorry, you haven't got the job.
Whatever the national regulations say will still have to be adhered to. Like I said, it is mostly a procedural improvement. It does not change at this stage the substance of the requirements for being allowed to work in another country.
We should say that the documents that each professional person has are going to be vetted and indeed authenticated by the country either in which they are resident or which issued those documents. So that's the other thing people will be a little wary of, is the possibility of forged documents, or even people buy degrees. How is that going to be overseen?
I think there is no difference between, this will not change now. I mean, being required to submit your documents electronically and having them accessible by the appropriate authorities at all times will, if anything, make such cases of forgery harder to commit that sort of forgery.
But basically it is then that each EU member state will have to have, let's say, a new committee or a little department somewhere that is going to check through all these documents before they go up online.
No, it will be, the documents will go online. It will be the responsibility of the person who is interested in moving to collect the documents, upload them, and then the authorities of the country in which they expect to work will check them. They do that now. The only thing that changes practically is that for these 5 professions they will be able to do the whole thing early, remotely and electronically.
And that is the brand new EU professional card. If you go to Europa websites, you can find all the details. Babis Smith-Exas, thanks for joining us. And that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. I hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.